Prithvi Shantirantarikshagam Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantaram Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shanti Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shanti Shantireva Shanti Shantirme Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santo, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyanto, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyato, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. We begin today on Sutra number 47. So this is one among the set of 1, 2, 3, 4, four sutras which give in a condensed form the essential practices for one on the path of bhakti or devotion. The first of the Sutra 46 we saw in our previous class. Let me read that once again. Kastarati kastarati mayam yaha sangam tyajati yo mahanubhavam sevate nirmamo bhavati. Who crosses the ocean of delusion? He who discards the company of the unholy, who serves great spiritual persons, who gives up the idea of egotism. So we saw this last time. The three primary practices. First, being mindful of the company that we keep. And by company, as I mentioned that time, it's not just the company of other people. It's primarily what kind of thoughts and ideas I associate myself with. And these thoughts and ideas could come from the friends that we have, from the people around us, but they can also come from the kind of books that we read, the kind of television programs that we see, the kind of movies that we see. So any and all of the sources which will somehow inject into me ideas that will make me forget the spiritual ideal, take me away from the spiritual ideal, those are to be avoided. So that's what discarding the company of unholy means. Who serves great spiritual person. We also saw the importance of service, and especially service of the holy, service of the teacher, service of the elders, the important service plays in spiritual life, and of course gives it the idea of egotism. How ego is the basic culprit in some sense. Not ego itself, but egoism. Ego is simply the sense of I, and that's kind of neutral. Attaching this I to things and entities that limit me, attaching this I to things that make me forget God, that is the problem. And that is what is meant by egotism. So today we will do Sutra number 47. Yo vivikta sthanam sevate yo loka bandham unmulayati yo nistraigunyo bhavati yo yoga kshemam tyajati. He who lives in solitude, uproots worldly bondages, goes beyond the three gunas, and renounces the idea of obtaining the objects of the world or their preservation, crosses the ocean of delusion. So here we have 4 more practices. Let's take them up one by one. Yo vivikta sthanam sevate. In the Gita also, there is one verse in which Krishna says, Vivikta sevi laghvashi, the characteristics important for a spiritual seeker. So this Vivikta sevi comes in many different texts. And Vivikta sevi means seeking solitude. And we have had occasion to discuss this on earlier occasions. Why is it important to actively seek solitude in spiritual life? One of the reasons we need to seek solitude is clearly, if it were already a part of our life, then there is no need of seeking it. But as life stands, we are always in the company of someone or the other or something or the other. When are we truly alone? And if you think about it, hardly any time. Because either we are in the company of people. If we are not in the company of people, even when we think we are alone at home or in your room, you probably have a TV running. If not, your computer is right in front of you. So you could be maybe in the company, in virtual company, if you like. Or maybe you're reading a book, in which case, if it's fiction, you are in the company of those fictional characters in that story. If you are reading non-fiction, then you are in the company of the ideas that the book deals with. So when are we really alone? Spiritual seekers might recognize that the only real chance we have of being alone is when we are trying to pray or meditate. And when we say that there are distractions while we pray or meditate, those distractions are the ones that are preventing me from being alone. And sometimes we blame those distractions for our inability to concentrate. It is just as possible that even though we might complain about those distractions, we probably don't want those distractions to go away fully. I know this sounds odd. The reason is this. If all the distractions go away while you are praying or meditating, and we haven't become enlightened yet, then the only person that remains, because God has not yet appeared and distractions have gone away, so the only person that remains is myself. So when I'm truly alone, I'm in the company of myself. And that's not always necessarily a very enjoyable experience. Many people, if they have just by themselves, have nothing to do, no one to meet, there's nothing, people get bored. And the implication of that is rather staggering, because if I'm alone, I'm in my own company and I'm bored. We would like to see it that way, but it means that my company is boring. I cannot stand my own company. And in order to not be in company of myself, I actually, in fact, seek distractions. And so the first requirement, seek solitude, is in order for the spiritual seeker to get to know himself or herself. It's often not recognized that the spiritual quest, although it might seem as if it is in the quest of the spirit, which it is, but the first stage is really getting to know oneself in one's non-enlightened state. Who am I as an unenlightened being? Who am I? It's important to know oneself as we are, with all our strengths as well as weaknesses. Because only if I know myself as I am, I will know where I should go forward. So, as far as possible, an honest self-assessment is very important. That can be a little difficult. It's so much easy for us to judge other people. We are doing it all the time. We have opinions about pretty much everybody. People we meet and people we don't meet. We have opinion about the world, about the government, about the president, about anybody. How difficult or easy it would be? What is my opinion of myself? And many of us are not very good at it. So either we may have a very bloated opinion of ourselves, that I'm the best person around, or the other extreme, just think like, oh, I'm so worthless, I'm so useless, So people generally tend to go in these extremes. And what we want as spiritual seekers is neither this kind of a forced humility to just say how worthless and terrible I am, nor kind of a bloated ego just saying I'm the best in everything. But just look at oneself as we would look at a third person, as someone else, and say, if I were not myself, how would I judge myself? How would I judge this person if it were not me? And don't be afraid to be brutally honest with your judgment, because you don't have to tell the results to anyone. Because sometimes we might want to whitewash the results if we want to, we want other people to have good opinion about us. But if you don't want anybody to know, you don't have to tell anybody about it. Just your own personal assessment. Because then when I know what my weaknesses are, spiritual life becomes much more smoother. I then know what to do. I know what my strengths are. All that I need to do is to make sure that I have to preserve my strengths. Because if it's a strength, doesn't mean that it's going to be with me all the time. Just like weaknesses can be overcome, strengths can be lost. So we have to make sure that whatever my strengths are, I'm able to preserve it. I don't lose them. And after I've identified my weaknesses, all that I need to do is to start working on them. And if it's too overwhelming to work on all of them at once, I can work on them one by one. Identify which is my greatest weakness and say, okay, the next 3 months or 6 months or a year, I'm going to work on all, but going to specifically focus on this weakness. That is a much better way of bringing about inner transformation. Oftentimes, many of us are waiting for miracles to happen, for some visions to come, and they could come. Through God's grace, all of these things might happen. But don't wait for them. If you wait for them, then the chances of them occurring become less. Instead of waiting for such miracles to occur, it's so much more practical to find time in the course of a day to be just as find the solitude that this sutra speaks about. And just be by oneself, get to know yourself well, and then to the extent I know myself well, the path for me forward becomes clear. So that is the first great benefit of seeking solitude. And then when this knowing myself becomes a little bit clearer, then I have a much greater freedom in trying to seek God. Otherwise, without this basic self-knowledge, spiritual progress can be greatly hindered. And that's why the practice here is vivikta sthanam labhate sevate, seeking solitude. Next is your lokabandham unmulayati. Lokabandham unmulayati means uprooting worldly bondage. Now what are the kind of bondages? Now bondage is something that clearly that doesn't allow me freedom. It ties me down. So we have to see what are the kind of things that tie me down to this world. they could range from the attachments I have developed to the things in this world, both visible and visible attachments could be attachment for people, attachment for things, for property, for everything that I see as mine. But it can also include attachment for a recognition that I want people to praise me, to appreciate me. It can include attachment for enjoyments, not just in this world, but enjoyments even after I die, which is how the whole idea of heaven comes in, that I want to go to heaven afterwards because I'm attached to just enjoying, and I think that, well, after death, enjoyment might come to an end. I want that enjoyment to continue after death, which is why then seeking after heaven, that can be another bondage. What is the sign of freedom? The sign of freedom is that nothing inhibits me. I don't feel pushed by anything behind me, and I don't feel pulled by anything ahead of me. A lot of times our ambition, our attachments, our desires seem to push us into doing things. And then the expectations of other people and our hopes for the future pull us from ahead. So if all the time, think about it this way. If you are walking on a street and there is somebody pushing you from behind and some other people pulling you, and if they're pulling you in different directions, it's not going to be an enjoyable experience. But that's pretty much how our life has been. Although we are not able to see the ropes that tie us to this world, these are invisible, but they are there. All the stress and anxiety and worry and suffering that people have is because of these invisible ropes pulling us in different directions. Many of these of our own making. And although we might want to blame the world around us for these ropes, Swami Vivekananda put it very clearly in that poem, the Song of the Sannyasin. He says, "Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on." In our ignorance, we might think that I'm tied to the world by all these ropes. But really, no. If I just open my eyes and see clearly, I'm actually holding those ropes and being dragged by them. I'm not tied, really. I'm holding them. And all that I need to do is just let go. And that is probably among the toughest thing in this world, just to let go. It's so easy. Some might see, even when, as babies, when we were born, you see young little babies, they all come with clenched fists. I mean, there could be a biological reason for that, but there's something about, and metaphorically we can see that this clenched fist, it becomes then a metaphor that the things that we possess, things that we have, we don't want to let go. But we know, whether we like it or not, sooner or later, if we don't let go of the things in our life willingly, they will be snatched away from us. Of course, everything will be snatched away from us when we die. We come into this world with nothing, we are going to go with nothing. The only thing that we will carry with us is our karma. What kind of thoughts I have thought, what kind of actions I have done. That's the only thing that I will carry with me. So, but even before death snatches away everything from me, nature will snatch away things from me even when I'm living. If there is a stock market crash, I might have done the most smartest investments. They can just go. Natural calamities. These big fire and mudslide in Southern California recently, and there was tsunami, earthquakes, any number of things can happen. And things which were mine are no longer mine. People whom we love around us, they, of course, death is one way separation occurs, but it's not necessarily only death. People can move, go to a different place. My closest friend can be now in a very far place, and I may not be able to see him or her anymore. Although with FaceTime and Skype you can still see them, but it's not same as seeing a person face to face. Parents experience this all the time. Children, as they are growing up, of course, they're your own children, you are attached to them. When the children grow up, when they for graduate studies, and when they start families on their own, the children move away from home, and that can be tough. Again, if we are not able to let go when the right time comes, it can be very difficult. All of those things are included in this loka bandham unmulayati, which doesn't mean that a spiritual seeker has to just kind of push away everything. That's not the idea. But even when we have things and people around us, deep inside to know that they are not really mine. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of a maid servant. In India and in many places of the world, it's kind of becoming less increasingly, but in many parts of the world, oftentimes they have, it's not so easy to have that kind of servants in the developed parts of the world. In the West, it's not that common, although it used to be several decades ago. But even in other parts of the world, it's not uncommon to have a servant at home, a 24-hour servant, who probably is from some poor family, and the family is in some village, and has come to the city to earn money and help the family back home. And oftentimes, many of these have come at very young age. I remember there were 2 or 3 in my uncle's home when I was growing up. Not in the home that I grew up in, but my maternal uncle's home. And they had come when they were very young. And they lived there all their life. They would go once a year to their village home. And they had become almost like a part of the family. No one saw them as servants. I've seen seen them even scolding and almost punishing my cousins, although the cousin was the master's children, not their children. So it's all fine, but in their heart of hearts, we may treat these people as part of the family, but they know, they can never forget that their real family is back in the villages. They know that at any time, if the master is angry or upset, they can just fire me and I'll have to leave. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of those people and say that maybe that's our condition too. Can we see ourselves as that we see all these things around us as mine, but it's probably not mine. My true home, for a spiritual seeker, my true home is with God. If I'm able to remember that, letting go of things is going to be much easier in life. Then I won't have to weep and cry and kicking and screaming when things that are my own are taken away from me, because they were never mine to begin with. This thinking is very helpful. Every spiritual seeker, as they advance in spiritual life, will have to somehow imbibe this way of thinking. And that's why I said, you don't have to push away the things that are with you. Everything that you see, that your people, your family, your friends, everything remains as it is. You don't have to take any aggressive action about it. all that has to be done is this internal change. Just reminding oneself, yes, all of these things that are with me have come through God's grace. They are, God has not really gifted them to me, although sometimes we look at these things as God's gift. It's much more easy to see as God has leased them to me. And anytime the lease can be over. And anytime God says, okay, it's time to return the thing that I had kept for safekeeping with you. We can then, the reason is this. Every time I get upset about things taken away from me, I'm actually forgetting God. And if a spiritual seeker, forgetting God is the worst thing that can happen. And therefore, being grateful for all the blessings in our life, making best use of everything that has come to us through God's grace, but also being ready every moment for the changes that may occur in our life. Seeing in behind everything around us a hand of God. That kind of thinking is what is referred to here when it is said, Loka bandham unmulati. The best way to remove bondages from our life is to recognize I have created those bondages. And if I have created them, I can remove them. That's the thing. So taking responsibility rather than blaming it on any external forces. The next is nistraigunyo bhavati, going beyond the three gunas. These gunas come again and again in Vedantic discussions. The sattva, rajas and tamas. All matter, nature is primarily constituted of these three gunas. Everything in nature, both living and non-living. And our bodies are parts of this nature. Our minds are part of this nature. And just as we are able to see the play of the gunas in the world outside, we should be able to see the play of gunas in our own body and mind. And the best way to not be affected by the three gunas is to remind myself, I'm not matter, I'm spirit, I'm the child of God. So long my relationship with God is not controlled by the three gunas, but my body, my mind, my ego, all of these are connected with the gunas. So not allowing the body and mind to control me. On the contrary, using the body and mind skillfully as my instruments, I can then kind of serve the three gunas. It's a little bit like this. If I have to go across a big lake, then I need a boat. And I can be in the boat and the boat will be on the water. So if I have learned how to row the boat skillfully, I can go across that water. And that water is like nature, and the water is filled with the three gunas. So I cannot avoid the three gunas. I'm kind of surfing over it. I'm going over it with the help of the boat. And the boat that you and I have is our body and mind. So not to look upon our body and mind as our enemy. It's helpful. A boat is helpful. But a boat is helpful when it is over water. Not when it is over the land, then it's a burden. You have to kind of, how will you carry it? It's not even helpful if the water is in the boat. Well, you need a little bit of water, but not as much water as the Titanic had. Then it doesn't help either. So the body and mind will help me go across this treacherous ocean of nature, this material nature which wants to bind me, if I am able to use my body and mind skillfully. And that means riding this ocean of the three gunas, surfing over it, going over it, but not allowing it to enter into me and submerge me or drown me totally. That is what is meant by saying nistraigunyo bhavati, going beyond the three gunas. Yo yoga kshemam tyajati. Now this word comes also in the Gita. So yoga and kshema are two things. Yoga here, in this particular phrase, yoga means to acquire. And kshema means to preserve. And that's essentially what all of us do in life. We need things, so we work, we strive hard to acquire the things that we need, and then ideally we work and strive hard to preserve the things that we have. And it's connected with what I said before, that all of this struggle to acquire what I need and to preserve what I have has its limitations because nature is all too powerful. In spite of my struggle to acquire and to preserve, in one stroke, nature can come and take away all these things. So, in some sense, it's a losing battle. Because as I said, no matter how much I acquire and how much I preserve, when the moment of death comes, all of this is going to be left behind. Which is not to say that acquiring things and preserving things that we need is a bad idea. At the very least, even a spiritual seeker needs to survive. A spiritual seeker needs food for physical survival, needs sleep, needs rest. So we do need these basic needs of life are important, because without them, how will I even pray? How will I even meditate? If I'm raked with hunger, and if there is winter and I don't have warm clothes to keep me warm, then best of luck trying to meditate in such situations. So we know that while overindulgence in these things can be harmful, but a total lack of these things won't help either. So we need at least the basic survival kit, so to speak, even for a spiritual seeker. And so it's not wrong in itself to want to acquire these things that we need and to preserve the things that we have. That's a natural human instinct. As Krishna points out in the 9th chapter of the Gita, that at some stage, a spiritual seeker will have to grapple with this dilemma. How do I use the time, energy, and resources available to me in the best possible way? So I'm a spiritual seeker. The spiritual ideal is important to me, and I need to invest some of my time, energy, and resources into that. But I need to survive too, and I need to invest some time, energy, resources into this too. And that's a dilemma many seekers have. And we sometimes use the word balance. How can I balance my secular biological needs with my spiritual aspirations? There is no one answer to this, and many of us try to figure it out through trial and error of where to strike that balance. What we read in the Gita and what Narada also seems to suggest is, should at any time in our life this thought may cross our mind that I would really like to pray more, I would really like to meditate more, but if I do that, how will I take care of myself? Who will pay my bills? Who will do all these things? It is there that Krishna offers this promise in the Gita. He says that if a stage is reached when I see I'm able to see increasingly the presence of God everywhere. That I'm not able to think of anything other than God. Let this thought, oh my God, then how will I take care of myself? Don't let this thought hold you back. Because if I become incapable of taking care of my secular needs because of my immersion in a spiritual ideal, then Krishna says, Yoga Kshemam Vahamyaham. I take care of this person. I bring to such a seeker whatever he or she needs, and I will preserve whatever he or she has. In other words, just like parents or the elders in the family help the young member of the family if they are incapable of taking care of themselves. God being our eternal parent, God being our father or mother, will take care of me. Now, it needs a lot of faith to be able to let go. And the best way going forward is not to always be with this kind of a conflict. Should I let go? Will God take care of me? When is the time? Which is the right time to let go? No need to do this. The best method is carry out all of your duties and responsibilities as best you can. Don't hold back. When it's time, whatever duties at whatever stage of life you are in, whatever responsibilities you have, carry them out as best you can. In the time that is available to you, do the best you can in carrying out the requirements of your spiritual life. If you have instructions from a spiritual teacher, carry them out as best you can. The power of spiritual life is such that once it's like getting into it's a little bit like when you're rowing a boat, and sometimes when you're going against the current, you have to really row harder. But sometimes you will find then you reach a point when you just find you're with the current, and then you'll find that the rowing becomes much easier because then the current helps you. In spiritual life, it's a little bit like that. That in the beginning, it can appear very difficult. It can be sometimes very discouraging. And some people feel discouraged. They like, oh no, I can't do this anymore. Let me turn my boat and go back. But the heroic soul, the brave soul, the courageous one, that is often the word used for spiritual seekers is dhira, the brave one, the courageous one, never gives up. And then no matter how difficult it is, it's almost you have to be like a salmon going against the current. It's kind of rowing. And then you'll find at some point, you never know when and you never know how. It often happens in a very unexpected way. There is no fixed timeline for this. But suddenly you will find it becomes a little bit easier. You no longer have to row so harder. And then just that regularity, that faith, that sincerity, that devotion with which we carry out the practice, progressively then it becomes smoother and smoother and smoother. It is at that time you will see that you don't have to give up your duties and responsibilities. You will become incapable of doing them. So no need to give up forcibly. No need to decide, when shall I let go? No need to do that. Do your duties, do your spiritual practice. When the spiritual practice deepens, a time will be reached when you will not be able to do your practices. Your duties. And that's it. At that point, don't be worried. Oh my God, don't be worried because you will find that help will come. We see this happening in a very dramatic way in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, that, he was a priest in a temple. He used to get his monthly salary. He had a set of duties. He never neglected those duties. He didn't say, oh, I want to call on the Divine Mother, so let me not do my worship today. He never said that. All of his duties he did so sincerely, with full attention. But alongside that, after his duties were, temple duties were over, the rest of the time he spent immersed in a spiritual life. And then a stage in his life was reached when he became incapable of doing the worship. He didn't stop himself, but he didn't give up the work. You could say the work gave him up. And then you will see whatever he needed in life, whatever he wanted somehow came. He didn't even have to ask for it. Now that happened. He was an incarnation, he was an avatar. It's very dramatic in his life. But it can happen in the life of all of us. In fact, it has happened in the lives of generations of sincere spiritual seekers. All that we need is Shraddha, that deep faith, that the courage to hold on no matter how challenges we have, how many challenges we have in life, to hold on to our duties and responsibilities, do them as best we can, do them in the spirit of Karma Yoga as an offering to God. And then in the time that is available, do your spiritual practices. And you will see, you will not have to worry about balance, you will not have to worry about anything. Everything will happen in its own time, at its own pace, through the grace of God. So these are the 4 practices described in this sutra. Yo vivikta stanam sevate, yo loka bandhan unmulayati, yo nistraigunyo bhavati, yo yoga kshemam tyajati. Seeking solitude, letting go of worldly bondages, trying to go beyond the force of the 3 gunas, and then not being overtly concerned about one's worldly acquisitions and preservation. I use the word overtly because, as I said in the beginning, it's not bad to do it, but if I'm obsessed with that, then I cannot be a spiritual seeker at the same time. Any thoughts, ideas, questions, comments?
Swamiji, I really liked your metaphor of crossing the lake with a boat and not getting submerged in the 3 gunas. Can you give an example from perhaps our daily lives of ways in which today we are falling into the water? Or I have a little trouble still trying to understand the gunas in a day-to-day
I think every time I forget that there is more to my existence than just these immediate worldly concerns, I've kind of already metaphorically fallen into water. And every time I remember God, remember my spiritual aspirations, I kind of come out of it again. So we are taking frequent dips in the water.
Swamiji, the idea that we are the instruments of God and the idea that we are not matter but spirit, can these be combined or no?
Well, not at the same time, not at the same moment, but at different time. It's possible that in the morning you feel that you are an instrument of God, and by evening you feel you are the spirit.
Is that normal?
Why not? I mean, it's like this. If it's normal to sometimes feel very calm and sometimes feel very agitated, it's the same person. But we keep on changing, and if change is the way our mind functions, it's not abnormal to have times during the day or some period in our life when we feel a surge of devotion, a surge of love for God, and it's easier then to think of that I'm doing it out of love for God, as an instrument of God. And there are times when I might feel more a sense that I am the spirit. It's possible. It doesn't have to be that way, but having both of these is not necessarily abnormal. It's fine.
Thank you.
Because we have, all of us have tendencies in our heart which can appreciate the value of bhakti or devotion. But we have also tendencies which appreciate the value of looking at things in a more impersonal way. And both of these things can exist, and that's fine.
So Swamiji, in the sutra they talk about living in solitude. So, what does it mean to live in solitude? Does that mean being connected to your, divine, to your Atman basically? Because you always have to work in the world, or even if you're at home, you have all the thoughts that come to your mind and so forth. And so you could be completely thoughtless, and maybe that is the meaning of solitude. Or is it being connected to your true self somehow as much as possible during the day?
I think in the beginning, I think it's enough to recognize solitude as when you're just by yourself, when you're not in the company of other people. And for a spiritual seeker, that usually means the times, at least twice a day, you have the time you meditate and you worship. So those are the things I would say is solitude, at least in a visible sense, although the mind may still be. And then in a larger sense later on, it's a little bit like, suppose you are sitting at home and watching television. You are alone and you're watching television. Now, are you alone or you're not alone? In some sense, if you're watching television, then there is some story going on. And so you are kind of with those characters in that story. So there are these people around you in that story that you're watching in the movie or the TV program, but you also know you're alone. And the reason is that the people you see on your TV screen, you don't feel that they are the same level of reality as you. You are this real flesh and blood person sitting here, and there are all these pixels on the TV screen. So you are alone and yet not alone. In some sense, if you see that this whole world is a 3D movie, and so you can see you are watching this 3D movie. So as an observer of the 3D movie, you're alone, because none of the things in the movie are same level of reality as you. But every time you forget that you are watching it, every time you become a part of the movie yourself, then you're not alone. So it's like back and forth. Yeah.
Whereas my thoughts are not that clear, but it's just a question is coming to my mind that you always say that don't get attached with the material things, and all our minds and thoughts should go to God. But until I get to know what is bad thing, how do I know what is good? If God is good, so in order to know God, kind of I'm getting attached with material things, and I get bored, and I know this is not going to make me happy. So is it the good idea that it's okay how life is going, and get hurt or get bored, or you understand this is not the life, and then you understand yourself?
I think that for a spiritual seeker, any thinking or any activity which will connect me with God or my spiritual ideal would be a good activity. Any kind of thinking or any activity which makes me forget my spiritual ideal is not a good activity. I think that would be a simpler way to just look at it. And as far as possible, we need to keep ourselves engaged in activities which will not make us forget God. And it might seem as if, well, the kind of job that I have, the secular responsibility that I have, it's easy to forget God because that is many of the duties may have seemed to have nothing to do with God. The duty itself, the work itself may have nothing to do with God, but if I look upon that work, if I'm able to connect that work with God, and one way every spiritual seeker can connect that work with God is by thinking that the skill and the talent I have, the knowledge I have in order to do this work came to me through God's grace. God has put me in this situation in life, and by doing this work, I'm really doing it as an offering to God. I'm doing it as a service to God. So even the work itself may not be directly related to God, I look upon that work as a form of offering or a service. So that way, even when I'm engaged in doing that work which might seem very secular, in my mind, it still has a connection with God because I'm seeing that work as, at the end of the day, as an offering to God. So in that way, we can spiritualize everything that we do. With the recognition that any kind of a selfish activity, any kind of a harmful thinking, those are not the kind of offerings a spiritual seeker would want to make to God. It's like this, when we go to a place of worship and we sometimes carry with us fruits for offering or flowers for offering. Now, ideally, a spiritual seeker or devotee may want to give a good quality fruits, good quality flowers. It's not that, oh, I don't want this flower, so let me go and give it to the temple. That's not something we would do. So similarly, the different activities that we are engaged in, only those activities which are truly wholesome, which don't violate any ethical and spiritual principles, those are these good fruits, good flowers. And those are the things I can offer to God. And a spiritual seeker will make an effort to offer everything to God, which in other words, to try to make everything, not do anything which would not be fit for offering to God. So that way it's possible to remain connected with God through our thoughts, through our words and actions, provided we remember these things. Okay?
To go beyond sattva, rajas, and tamas. So I thought that when you are operating in sattva, that is the highest of the sort of quality you should have. So this one says that the sutra says you have to go beyond even sattva.
Yes.
What is that beyond sattva?
The first thing we have to do is to acquire sattva, because sattva is the one that will show us the way. You remember the story Sri Ramakrishna told about the 3 thieves. So sattva is what we should acquire. We should try to eliminate tamas. We should try to eliminate rajas and acquire more and more sattva. And is this sattva then, it's also a guna. Sattva itself is not enlightenment, but sattva is a way that will show me towards the enlightenment. At some point then, I'll have to leave behind even sattva. That is what transcendence means. Because sattva is still an attribute of material nature. And we want spirit. We want to leave everything material behind. That's what is meant by transcendence.
Swamiji, as you said that one should not stress a lot about leaving the worldly activities in order to enter into spiritual life. It happens like very gradually. So I was just thinking that if you think about lives of these great souls like Sri Ramakrishna or Swami Vivekananda, they were such enlightened beings. I know they had their own journeys, but still they were very conscious people. So how can a common man know exactly that he's ready for an intense spiritual life? Like how what are the signs that one could understand that?
Understand what?
That they are prepared for a spiritual life, or leaving the worldly things.
Yeah, good question. One thing to remember is this. Although we have been using words like worldly activities and spiritual activities, it's good to recognize that the activity itself is neither worldly or anything. All activities are kind of neutral. Let me put it this way. I will qualify that statement. I made it a very generic statement. But it's like this. Let's say, if I'm an engineer and I'm constructing a building, that doesn't necessarily feel like a very spiritual activity. You see? On the other hand, if I'm a spiritual seeker who is an engineer, and I see that the skill and knowledge and talent I've acquired in doing this construction work, it's given to me by God, and I'm using the skill that God gave me in the best possible way as an offering. All the action that I do, rather than crediting like how great I am, I say it's through God's grace. And at the end of the day, every day after doing my work at the engineering office, whatever work I do, I go home and then I offer everything at the feet of God. I would think then that construction of a building is a very spiritual activity. On the other hand, it's possible for someone to go and say, I'm offering this big worship in a temple. And in my heart, I'm like, oh, if I offer this worship, I hope I get that lottery. Or I hope my enemies suffer a lot. I think that worship is a very worldly activity. So it's not helpful to characterize the activity itself as a spiritual or worldly. It's more dependent on the person who is doing it, with what kind of attitude I'm doing it. Okay. So we'll stop here today, and then when we meet next time, we'll do the next sutra, that is sutra number 48. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. On Sunday for satsang, our subject will be Ramakrishna, past and present. And next Wednesday, we will continue with the study of Narada Bhakti Sutra. And on Saturday and Tuesday, our meditation arti will also continue as usual. Let's conclude with a prayer on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.